Okay. Well, good evening, and let's call this meeting of the South Bend School Board to order. Please join me in the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, so it's kind of a combo meeting tonight with the work session and then our regular meeting. And so starting off, we have Nancy Hungerford for the work session.
Thank you. Well, this is one of my favorite kinds of meetings with boards. We don't have any crises on the moment. You kind of sit back and think a little bit about boardsmanship and about the service as the board. So the first thing I want to do is start off by saying thank you for your service. I realize it is not an easy job, and I have personal experience in that. My late husband was superintendent in Oregon City Schools when I married him, and 3 years later he retired, and then he became a board member at Clackamas Community College for 10 years before his death. And there was a time when I think, it was sort of a hectic situation, and he was very, it seemed like a half-time job for him for a while. So I know it can get very complicated, and you've got a good board that can pull together. That's really what I think it makes boards successful. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about school board members, your duties and the legal requirements. In some ways, I don't mean this to be a downer, because what I'm going to tell you is that your authority as a board is really restricted by the laws in this state. And that goes all the way from the formation of boards, the formation of school districts, and to the various enactments of the legislature. And I bring this along because this is the 2021 Oregon Revised Statutes, Volume 9, Education and Culture. So there's some stuff in here about colleges and so forth, and a little bit about culture. But most of this in fine print is the Oregon law. Now, I started as a school attorney 43 years ago. Prior to that time, I was a school teacher in Georgia, Arizona. I taught a year at Drake University, and then I was a part owner of a newspaper in Montana, where I covered school board meetings, although then reporters were not allowed in executive session, so I had to sit outside a lot. Came to Oregon, bought a newspaper in the Milwaukee area, and I covered the North Clackamas School District. And after a year, maybe out of self-defense or something, they hired me as a HR director, PR director, public relations. And also, oh yes, by the way, you'll be Title IX director, and I was the first Title IX director and the first affirmative action officer. And after a year, they moved me into HR, where I knew virtually nothing, but I learned fast. And I was there for 5 years while I went to law school. And since then, I've been practicing school law primarily for Oregon school districts. I have done bargaining in Washington. I'm a member of the Oregon Bar, not the Washington Bar. And then I, along the way, evidently convinced my kids that it was a good job. And so they both joined the law firm, and their spouses did too. And now my ex-husband's son is a member of the firm, and we have another new member. So school law has burgeoned in that time. And the laws that control and relate to your operation of your school district definitely have grown. Part of that is just because the legislature really sees education as a very important part of their job. And it is. It's one of the most important things that government does for our people, is to provide education for the kids. But in part, we have so much law because people come along, and many of them with political leanings, and they decide that this might be a good way to make their mark on the state. And so there's new law being added all the time. And I've been around long enough to see that some of this new law that was new when I started is virtually ignored now. It's been replaced by others. It's been shoved to the side by others. So let's just start with the first slide here. Congratulations, you're a school board member. Do I put to move this? Okay. So we're going to talk about the agenda, which is powers and authority of the board and limitations. And then I do want to get into a little bit about board meetings and public meeting laws, dealing with complaints, and then ethical requirements for board members. It's a lot to tackle in one hour, but we can hit the highlights, and then I think you'll know where you need to go for more. So congratulations, you're a school board member. So a couple of things that right off the bat might surprise you. School boards exist only by the pleasure of the legislature. When Oregon adopted its constitution back in the 1860s, they adopted laws that made the legislature essentially the school board for the state. Made all the decisions, which was kind of a stretch because most of the schools at that time were little country schools that groups of neighbors had put up and hired a teacher if they could find one and decided what the curriculum should be, mostly reading, writing, and arithmetic, but the law today still says that Oregon's constitution makes education a state responsibility and a function. The state constitution also provides that the governor is the state superintendent of public instruction. And even though the governor appoints, we had an elected state superintendent for many, many years. But then that was changed. The governor always had the authority to appoint the state superintendent, and that's how it goes now. It's an appointed office. The legislature enacts laws governing schools. Those are called Oregon Revised Statutes, so ORSs, you hear that all the time. And then the Oregon law creates a state board of education, which is largely appointed by the governor. There are a couple of individuals on there who have responsibilities. I don't know if the state treasurer is on there or some of those, but largely the governor appoints the state board of education. The State Board of Education ultimately is one that has to adopt these Oregon administrative rules. So OARs is what you hear about. And those are, they constitute more of the working kinds of areas of what kinds of specific are we going to be dealing with. I've listed here what are some of the powers and the limitations. And I think this is kind of interesting because it states, pursuant to law, school boards have control of the district schools that are responsible for educating children residing in the district. But that phrase, pursuant to law, is very powerful. So just some examples. The legislature has said that the school board has the power to set the calendar and hours of operation. So you have some school districts in the eastern part of the state, particularly, decide they'll have a 4-day school week, which makes a lot of sense for them when there's long distances to bring kids in and long distances for them to go to the athletic competitions and all that. However, the state statutes also say that each district must meet minimum requirements for each grade level. So there are going to be some, must-dos for each grade level. It goes that particular. The state board says that the school districts adopt textbooks and other instructional material. But you must involve the staff, and you generally must choose from a state-approved list. There is a state textbook commission that looks at texts and decides a group of textbooks for, let's say, U.S. history. And school districts are supposed to pick from among those. Now, there are opportunities to ask for an exception to that, and it gets approved most of the time. But generally, the state is controlling the textbook choices too. You can adopt courses of study and set graduation requirements. So there are some schools in this state, some school districts that have 27 credits required for graduation from high school. There are others that, and most have the minimum, which by law is set at 24 credits. But they could go higher if they wanted to, but some do have 27. And so, you know, there are certain subjects, we can say the board adopts the courses of study, but there are those minimum subjects. And they include certain subjects, you know, about American history, of course. But it was sort of news to me, actually, that we have specific laws, and they usually have a person's name attached to them because of a victim, that relate to sex abuse prevention. So that's one of the mandatory topics. And schools have some latitude about how they teach that, but they don't necessarily, you know, they can't say our school district will teach nothing about sex. Not allowed. The school district provide for the transportation of students. So you can have your own bus service, or you could send out taxis for each of your kids if you were so inclined. Or you can have a contracted bus service with some procedures. But you have to meet the legal requirements for driver training, and there are places where you have to make bus service available to all students who live outside certain limits. And we have something like a McKinney-Vento, which says that if you have students who are ones who are moving around a lot, that you have to continue to provide them bus service to bring them back to your schools if they move out during that school year. So to try to keep their schooling more consistent. That's more federal law. School districts have a lot of control, and school boards have a lot of control over construction, maintenance of facilities. And that some of that has to be exercised with your local public, because you have to pass bond measures in order to be able to fund those. And there are safety requirements, big time safety requirements for school buildings and for retrofitting existing buildings. And now we have one other thing that's put into the law, and that is that we have financial support to help school districts if they want to build a new school. They can pass a local levy, and then the state will pony up so much money, which has been really a great incentive for school districts to replace aging buildings. It's been a very good program. I guess the other thing I say to people is that because school districts were created by and placed into the Constitution as under the power of the legislature can actually create school districts and can eliminate school districts. Now, the state of Hawaii, for instance, had one big school district. But in the time of my practice, the legislature decided that there would be no more elementary only districts. We used to have a lot of districts that were elementary only, and then you had the high school, union high school districts. And the legislature, was probably about early 90s, that it went into effect that you had to unify. So you're going to have a K through 12 district with very few exceptions. So a whole bunch of elementary districts got eliminated. But they have also created one new school district, which is politics, pure and simple. So the vote from somebody in Morrow County was needed to pass some bill, and so the legislature agreed to do what he had been campaigning for many years, create a new district in Ione, and to create it right in the middle of Morrow County School District. Now, does this make any sense? It does, I guess, for the people of Ione, but you know, from the standpoint of administration, what had been a total county school district, but they did that because politics. So I don't tell you that they always make wise decisions. So starting with a couple of aspects of the law here. So again, what you have control over and what you don't. By law, you have to, at your first meeting after July 1st, you must elect chair and vice chair. But no member may serve as a chair for more than 4 years in a row. I didn't even know that, and nobody wants to be chair for more than 4 years in a row, I don't believe. Usually boards change over the chair.
Well, in most districts, it's only 2 years. You had to vote on that for 4 years as a board.
Right, yeah, so continuity.
Does that apply to vice as well?
What?
Does that apply to vice chair?
Oh, yeah, the vice chair, I think it does, but I can't be certain of that. I believe it may just apply to the chair. And so the school board must provide for a time and place at regular special meetings, but you have to provide notice to the public at least 24 hours in advance. And you have to meet within your school district boundaries. Except if you're going to have some sort of social gathering, or like if you were going to go up to the school board's convention this weekend and you were going to get together for dinner. And sometimes people rent rooms in their hotel and then they get together and they talk about a lot of business, but they can't take any action when they're outside of their school district. That's so that the public has the right to see you in action. Now, get to this in a little bit, but a lot of times the public thinks that board meetings are meetings that are open for discussion of all sorts of topics, but they aren't. You don't have to even have public comment. And there are times when school boards have refrained from having any public comment, and the times I could think of is when there was a strike brewing or going on. So the board creates those opportunities. There are 2 times when you have to open the floor and have comment. One is at your budget meeting, when you adopt your budget, there has to be an opportunity for the public to comment on the budget. However, this is kind of after the fact, in my opinion, because you open your budget committee meetings to the public. They have to be public meetings too. That's the time when the public needs to show up and campaign for their, what they would prefer to see. Let's enlarge the sports program over here, or let's, add this to the curriculum or whatever. But you have to have that. And then this is one that school boards oftentimes don't know about. If you are going to use an executive session to interview candidates for superintendent, you must have a hearing at a board meeting before that, at which you give the public the opportunity to comment on the qualities that they want in a superintendent. This is even before you go out to look for candidates. Why was that there? Well, it's a compromise between the people who'd like to have that whole selection process open, everybody comes, everybody weighs in, everybody interviews. And, some school boards do have meet the candidates, meet the finalists kinds of opportunities. But you control most of that selection process, but that is the one thing that you do not. Now, I bring it up because if you hold an executive session to interview superintendent candidates and you haven't done that, you haven't held a public hearing, you will be reported to the Ethics Commission, and each and every one of you will be found in ethical violation. And that's happened to a number of boards recently. As a matter of fact, I had one case where one board member turned the rest of the board in, but that board member was there too. And so 7 of them. There's some sort of minimal fine, and it used to be like $50. I think maybe it's more like $250 now. So just a word, why is that something that I don't think you ever hear about? There are requirements that you hold your meetings in public. So the essence of that is that the public gets to see you making decisions. You may hold these executive sessions, but they are limited and they're outlined in the book that's public meetings and records laws. And I should have brought my copy along, but it's all online now, and it's yay thick, has all of the case decisions for years and years, because we've had a lot of controversy about public meetings and particularly public records. So you can hold expulsion hearings in private executive session, and you can make decisions in those. That's one of the very few times. And you can examine confidential student records in executive session without going into open session. And not really any decision making out of that. But expulsion was placed in that special category because I think the thought is that maybe we don't want to subject students and their families to having that all be public. More and more recently, I have had situations where parents have asked to have expulsion hearings in public, including one involving not the expulsion, but a 2-day suspension of a kindergartner. And this kindergartner had been in a considerable amount of trouble in a very short, until February, and some of it involved improper touching. And I warned the parents when we started the meeting, you know, the board has these records that they're going to be referring to. When you have this in open session, all of those records of your child are going to be public records. Do you want to do that? And they said yes. They invited the other kindergarten parents to come to this hearing. So things are different than they used to be about such issues as privacy, I guess. So the board can authorize district participation in interscholastic activities, but the league, we don't, you know, school districts don't control athletic leagues, but state legislature does set some expectations, and one of those is, and this is almost a quote, the league must implement equity-focused policies and complaint procedures. So even OSAA has some legislation. The board must authorize contracts before payment, including all labor agreements. That was put in there once because the superintendent agreed to something and thought they were going to take it to the board, and the board didn't approve it, but the collective bargaining unit said, well, wait a minute, the superintendent approved this, so it's good. We have, and that's what our Employment Relations Board ruled. So after that, the School Board Association went and said, let's have a law that says the board has to approve all the labor agreements. The board may authorize the superintendent by policy to pay certain contracts, and it's usually $1 a month, you know, because there's all of those small bills, and the superintendent probably doesn't see most of those as your finance department. So you can see that this balance between local control and a state standard system is always at play. And so there are people who say, well, we should have more local control. And there are people who say, no, that's kind of dangerous because we'd have people doing things that, you know, are good for the state as a whole. So it's a constant sort of back and forth. In terms of the board and personnel, the board approves the employment of the superintendent. There's one employee that you approve and you supervise. However, you're generally not involved with other employment decisions, although I know that boards typically do vote on licensed employees and not classified employees. Why that is so, but maybe some boards vote for all of them. I had a small board once that got in trouble with the open meetings law because they, in their executive session, discussed the employment of a custodian. Now, boards don't usually get down into the weeds on custodians, but this was a very small one school, elementary only, before we had unification. And so they didn't follow the proper procedures, and they got a decision from the Ethics Commission as well. There is now limitations on the length of time you can employ a superintendent, a contract of 3 years. That came about because when we had unification, some of the small districts were giving their outgoing superintendents, because they were going to be disappearing, these small districts, gave them 5-year contracts. And so it was determined that that was probably not a great thing. At least some legislators thought so, they put this 3-year maximum. But then notice what else it says. But the board can issue a subsequent contract for an additional 3 years at any time. That strikes me that, you know, on which meeting you could give a contract, you know, for the superintendent for the current 3-year cycle, and then you could meet next meeting and then give the superintendent a contract for the following 3 years. I don't really know what that means.
No one's tried it.
Nobody's done that. It's 3 years. The district must maintain written personnel policies. And you have huge policy books. I mean, they're all online.
Mm-hmm.
When I started, I went to a school board meeting for a small elementary board, and they were dealing with some personnel issues. So I said, well, let me see your policies. And they brought out something that was about yay big. I said, this is all the policies you have? you belong to OSBA, and they give you, even then, OSBA was giving you sample policies. And they said, yeah, we don't want a lot of policies, because that way we would have to do what the policies say. So I told them they might get in trouble without policies, but nowadays, I see boards and you have like 10 policies every board meeting to approve. Because you have to update them after the legislative sessions, you have to adopt new ones, you have to modify. It's a never ending business of policy adoption. But that is really where you as a board have the most weigh in and most influence, because you, within the confines of the law, you have some choices in terms of policy development. And I know that, in some districts, there's a procedure where board members sit down and look at all of those and spend enormous amounts of time, or some districts kind of farm it out to a subcommittee. Staff help you on that, but it is an area where board action is required. Now, technically speaking, administrative rules, the OARs or the ARs in our policy books, are not policies. So, but I have, most boards seem to approve those as well, and those are updated in conjunction. So you have a new policy because there's a new law, let's say, and so OSBA will send you a draft sample policy, and then they usually send along an administrative rule, which talks about how you're going to implement that. So public meetings law, for instance, is a good example. There's state law that says you have to meet in public. There's a short policy usually, but then there's a fairly lengthy description of how you're going to do that, what your notice is going to be, what kinds of things you're going to discuss. So every district has those. Keeping track here of my time. So public participation in school district decisions. And I have this, although the public has a desire to participate in school district decision making, the right to do so is limited under state law. The public has the right to elect you. And if they don't like what you're doing, they can expel you as a board member. That rarely happens, but I have seen it happen. That's called a recall. They can also vote you out. They can make life so miserable you resign. So the voters have a choice of the board members. But the public, as I told you, has a legal right to speak only a couple of times at these meetings. And I talked to you about the superintendent search process. So, but the scheduling as to the timing of when a public participation or public comment, how much time is going to be allowed, that's all up to you and to generally the board chair, vice chair, and superintendent when they put the agenda together. Because sometimes you might even have the public, a lot of boards, they have student groups come in to perform, and they usually do that first, and then after that they have, maybe the public comment. Other boards will typically have public comment at the beginning, and some of them, put it at the end if they've got other matters or whatever. So that's your choice. Optional participations, I just list some examples there. So you can have work sessions and you can allow public comment, or you can not. You can eliminate the public comment section of agendas when you got a lot of business, or the common time that I've seen that is when there's a strike being brewing. And then there's no right of the attending public to speak when you have a presentation. So let's say a student chooses an open hearing for the expulsion. I have been in some districts where the student chose that. The young man was going to be expelled for 3 weeks and could not participate on the football team during the 3 weeks because he had brought a knife with him on the bus and coming home from a athletic event. He wanted to eat a bag of candy, so he used his knife. He put it out. He used the knife to open the bag of candy, which whereupon it was displayed. And so people knew that he had a knife, and it was a fairly sizable knife. And the superintendent heard that and decided 3 weeks would be about a right amount. Not a semester, not a year, anything. But the parents assembled a crowd of supporters with banners and support stands and so forth for all of this. And it was a 3-hour meeting because they allowed public comment. And at the end of that time, the board said, well, I think that maybe the best thing to do is to follow the superintendent's recommendation. And that was how they made the decision. They agonized over it, in fact. But you know, there are reasons why we have laws against, or not laws, and policies and laws against having young people carry knives to school. So as I said, the public meetings law purpose is to have the public be able to watch you make decisions. No, you're on tap for that. So there's a couple of questions I have next. And I don't know that we have time to go into this, but there are lots of challenges, particularly for the board chair, and more so in recent years. One of them, the second bullet there, members of the audience have been told no booing, no applauding, but do it anyway. And what I've seen boards do, I'm on the foundation board at Clackamas Community College. I'm not on the school board per se, but they remodeled a portion of their buildings. And I noticed when I saw it that they have built it so there is a room in the back and it's all equipped with audio visual stuff. And then there's the table where the board sits, and then there's the audience. And it's set up precisely if the audience gets unruly and drowns out the board, won't keep quiet, you know, won't follow the rules, that they just adjourn the meeting, go into the back room and continue the meeting and show it on the audiovisual screen for the people who remain, and they can conduct their meetings. And it's been really, I think, very destructive to the authority of the board when the audience can force them to end a meeting and not do the business they're there for. So you don't have a little room in the back here that I can see what you can go into.
When you ate in.
Yeah, right, yeah. You know, I always advise one warning from the board chair if there's somebody who's yelling profanities, screaming, shutting down the meeting. And some boards have had to have police presence, and that's allowed for. I mean, you can eject the person with warnings. We've had occasions, of course, where teachers are wanting to get attention for their positions in collective bargaining. And this is another example. You don't allow that to disrupt. They go to the back of the room, they can hold their signs up, they can't hit anybody over the head with signs, and they can't block the view of the audience. And I talked to you about the complaint rooms. So legal executive sessions, just a few things that I'm sure somebody in this room knows because it's probably your board secretary. So you have to include it on the agenda. And you have to name the specific subsection of the law that allows you to have the executive session. So for instance, if it's for, you know, interviewing candidates for superintendent, if it's for holding an expulsion hearing, yeah, you've got something there. And then before adjourning to executive session, and boards typically don't do this, and it is not a real big thing, but you really should convene an open session, announce the reason for the executive session, the subsection, go into executive session, and then you come back to that open session. So most of the time, boards just say, okay, well, we'll meet there, and 5:30 it'll be executive session, and at 6:30 we'll open the meeting, but that's not really precisely right. I don't know that it causes any real difficulty in the terms of your legal decisions that you make and how it will stand up, but that's the way it's supposed to be done. And then this is very important if you have media presence. You have to start the executive session, the board chair cites once again the reason for the executive session and warns all those present that the contents are not to be publicized. So we have this provision in our law that allows the media to be present. Now, when I was in Montana, the newspaper, and I covered the school board meetings, they didn't allow me to go into executive sessions. That wasn't their state law, but it is here in Oregon. Unfortunately, now we have a greater difficulty. It used to be you had your hometown newspaper and maybe occasionally the Eugene paper or maybe a radio station. But now we have all sorts of people who are setting themselves up as, local news sources. And they have some, website or some sort of way of communicating. And I've even seen in small towns where they used to mimeograph off a little sheet of paper and they left it at the local restaurants. And they claim to be news sources. And so they claim to be able to come in and be part of, or to observe is what they're doing, the exec session. And we have had some questions about that, and generally we allow them to come in just because we don't want to get reported to the Attorney General's office and, have a judgment made about that. Somewhere I hope that we do. So we have these questions. Let's go on to complaint appeals requirements. This is an area where boards have more and more activity. Because we've always had complaint policies that tell the public how they are to complain about any aspect of school district operations, including personnel. And a lot of times this is about personnel. Sometimes it's about a lower level person in the organizational chart, and that complaint will go through several letters. You will have a principal maybe hear the complaint. Let's say it's a parent complaining about a teacher. But there's a stacked series of appeals. And so generally there's an opportunity to appeal the decision of the principal to the superintendent or designee. And then there is generally this procedure for that to come before the board. But the board has options under the law. You do not have to hear every one of those complaints. You can, instead, you can actually go into executive session and decide whether you're going to hear the complaint or whether you're going to not. And you will be reviewing the decision down below. And I had the board in a fairly large district had a policy that they believe that they should, firsthand hear every complaint. And so they changed that policy after they had one parent who had, I was there for 3 different board meetings. And this parent was complaining about the fact that their daughter, who was very bright, had made it to the gifted class in language arts, but she had missed making the cut for the gifted class in math by a few points. They complained about that. And under that board's policy, they heard that. And they heard it in different formulations 3 times. And it took up probably 10 hours of their time in 3 different meetings. After that, they decided that they would look at their policy again and change it so that they have some choices about what they hear. And the only real place where you end up having to do the hearing or some form of judgment is if there's a complaint against the superintendent, because you are the only one above the superintendent. Nowadays, for the most part, what our law firm recommends is that the board not try to hold any kind of hearing itself on the facts, but that you employ a investigator and through our law firm, which provides a certain amount of confidentiality during the process. And then you get the report. And you can discuss that generally in executive session, somewhat dependent upon the content of the complaint. And then the board can decide to accept that report or not. And if you decide not to, then you can send it back to the investigator and say, we really need to know more about this, so let's. And we employ people who have, by and large, PI licenses, but we tend to favor those who've had some background in school business, school law, or typically school administration, retired folks. So that's really the way that boards manage the influx of complaints that we see nowadays. Used to be that complaints reaching the board level were pretty rare. Now, I know that we have boards that have complaints on their agenda every meeting. And it just depends on, you know, which beef somebody has against which school or board. And then there could be complaints against you too. So that, you know, has to, by and large, that has to happen in open session because you are public and you accepted that when you ran for it. So there's a little bit about typical appeal process there, and then board policy on complaints. And as I said, there are some options for you. The whole board involvement in every complaint. You know, I think that boards chose that in small districts because it did give the public perception of access, but the public isn't allowed to comment on those hearings anyway. But the time demands can be excessive, and the board, there's the perennial complainer, like the one I told you about, the 3-session displeasure about his daughter not getting to the honors class there. But here are your alternatives. You can have the board, you know, that complaint procedure goes up through the superintendent level. So if it's not about the superintendent, you can have the board review and hear a patron appeal in executive session, and then decide to hold whether you're going to hold a hearing or not. That is not what I recommend, because holding those hearings, if you're going to do the thoroughness that most of these complaints nowadays would demand, you want to have an investigator. And so it's dealing with a district where there was a parent who didn't think that the daughter was getting enough playing time, and so she filed a complaint against the athletic coach and assistant coach and the athletic director. Well, that's not one that you're going to be able to handle in any board meeting. It took the investigator many hours of interviewing before it make recommendations on that. So that alternative is kind of going by the by that districts boards actually hold the hearing themselves. Or the board delegates it to an independent hearing officer to report back to the board. Or I've seen this in complaints where there was a high level of visibility, I guess, that the board might, it's going to be a lengthy investigative kind of process. So the board designates 1 to 2 of their members. They kind of summarize the information in sort of the way that the independent investigator does, and then they report back to the whole board. So you have that as an option too, although I don't find a whole lot of board members volunteering to be on this. So we go on in to talk about some problems of potential solutions, but I think what I would like to do at this point is make sure that I answer your questions. And, you know, we get into community relations challenges, and some of this is more, you know, it's wordsmanship. I want to hit the ethical issues one, which is the last slide. But questions to this point.
So,
Yeah.
I thought I heard you say that, basically anybody who declares themselves to be a reporter needs to be allowed into executive session.
Well, that's the question. So I get this call from a small district on the coast, and they've got the local person who writes things up and probably used to put them in the restaurants like I described, and now has some sort of a website or podcast or whatever. And we contemplated that and asked for information about circulation and so forth. And then we decided that it was probably better to allow this person into the executive session, make sure we give the warning about not communicating. Because we knew that if we refused, then they could file a complaint against the board with the Oregon Attorney General's office. And in a way, by allowing the person to come in, they got more background about the decision that was made. They could report that out, but maybe that has some impact, but sometimes it doesn't have any impact. But it was just a choice between, do we really want to have this thing done before the Attorney General? Yeah. Look at these ethical issues. Let me check my time here, because I think I'm close to being out, and I do not want to keep you from your board business. So ethical issues that I have seen arise, there are ethics and you have to sign something when you. I have to sign it because I'm on the foundation board of the college, so I kind of know that it's declaring and notifying you about financial interests and, what you have to do if there's a matter before you that might financially benefit you or your family or disadvantage you or your family. Purchases of land are oftentimes involve that if they involve some piece of land that a board member might own or a family member. And the definition of family members is pretty broad. After there was a controversy in Portland about a parking garage situation, I can't remember, it was expanded to include in-laws like son-in-law. And so it's, I think when you sign that, they have you a list of those people. It isn't that you can't vote in all cases, but it's that you have to declare it. Now, there are a few times when you cannot even vote. And that would be where you are directly impacted financially. But, the questions about your family members, those would probably be where there might be a possible advantage to you, but not a direct one. We used to get questions from board members who said, my spouse is a teacher, and now I'm being asked to vote on the teacher contract. Is that ethical? And so there was a decision out of the AG's office to say, no, you're voting on a group compensation package. But if you were voting for your spouse who is going to become, let's say, assistant superintendent, and that was a unique position, not part of a group, you would need to abstain. So the whole idea, of course, is to have clean government. Now, sometimes I think that we go a little overboard on that with some of the decisions that, the very, very modest kinds of financial benefit that might come somebody's way just because they happen to be some way related to something. But there's generally some good sense to those. And, I think that looking back over my 43 years as a school board attorney, I don't remember any situation where someone was accused of using their school board position for their own financial benefit. I really don't. There have been a couple of close calls recently, but I remember when I started out, we had a school board member whose son owned an equipment company, and we were purchasing some major equipment for, grounds maintenance and so forth. And, he abstained. Sometimes board members choose to abstain, even though they're not absolutely required to, because they do not want to have that impression of having any stake in the decision and be influenced by that. So the board members also must maintain confidentiality of documents and proceedings as the law allows. You have a responsibility, for instance, not to disclose what happens in executive session. And we used to hear about cases where reporters would attend executive sessions and then they would walk out into the parking lot after the meeting and say to the board member, well, that was really an interesting discussion you had about X, Y, and Z and not saying in executive session, but X, Y, and Z. So what did you think about all of that? Or, more pointed questions. And then a board member might speak. Well, then the reporter could report. So there were those little tricks that members of the news media knew. Now, I never engaged in any of those. But I would tell you that when I became PR director for the North Clackamas School District, in the first year, we had a situation where a board heard from their attorney about a payoff. Some parents shouldn't say payoff. A payment in damages for parents whose daughter had gone to summer school. She was an 8th grader and she was in with high schoolers, and they played the movie about the Charles Manson murders. And the permission slips had not been sent home. So it was a school teacher who violated a rule and did not check or. I don't know if he didn't send them out or he just didn't check whether they came back. The parents were filing suit and that was being discussed in executive session with the attorney in terms of how much money we might be willing. And the deputy more pace now pretty much handles that for you. That was a situation where the local newspaper reported it. And they got the information from calling the parents outside of the executive session. The interesting thing about it was that my husband at the time was publisher of that newspaper. So it was a little bit of an awkward situation, but that, those are the kinds of things that you have some confidentiality, but if you talk about it outside of the board meeting, then it can be publicized. So have to keep in mind. Talked about the expulsion appeals being the only exception to making decisions in executive session, and then as part of already covered. So I think we're at the end there. There's some other material here about community relations, solutions, challenges, and solutions that I've sort of gathered along the way. But I think we're really close to the end of our time here, and I know you have a full agenda. Anything else that you would like to hear from me or have me cover? And I can't promise you that I will automatically know the answer, but after 43 years, I know most of the questions. So
what are the consequences of breaking confidentiality from executive session? Well, I assume it's different depending on who might be breaking that confidentiality.
it would. So for instance, if there was a staff member in there who broke confidentiality, that might lead to some personnel related action. Could be a reprimand, it could be, I suppose, all the way to dismissal. For a board member, there really isn't any, except that, you can be up for recall. You can be voted down in the next election. Board members sometimes do pass resolutions that are in effect saying that we do not approve of the action of a certain board member. So it's board members as a whole, if there's a majority of the board who votes to, I don't know if you would call that anything that has a impact, because you can't take away the board members' right to vote on issues unless they are recalled. But you can express as a board your displeasure about someone. And I believe that, for instance, the Seattle board did that in terms of a board member whose use of certain language and terminology was disapproved by the whole board. And so, although they asked for him to cease and desist, he did not. And so, next meeting, they had a vote. It's not a vote of no confidence, because you really can't have no confidence in your fellow board members. You can only say that we don't like what you did. And it, it doesn't carry much weight, but it might in the next election. It might if the board member cares about the opinions of fellow board members, but maybe that is not the case in certain situations. And then, of course, there have been any number of attempts to recall board members. They largely are not successful, because I think a lot of people figure, well, if they're recalled, then the board will appoint another person. And, I'd sooner wait and have that person that I would like out stand for election the next time, or maybe they won't stand for election. And then we can get, somebody else in there. Somebody that I can vote for, as opposed to having the board appoint. So I think some of it depends upon how many years this board member have left in their term.
Interesting that wouldn't go to ethics.
Yeah. Code of ethics, yeah.
Ethical.
Yeah.
Especially if you agree to it.
Mm-hmm. I think that is definitely, it's one of the things that board members contemplate. And, it's very common for people to come on the board and then see themselves as the ombudsman and to the point where I get calls when new board members is saying to people, now online as well as in person, hey, if you got any problem, just give me a call, I'll get it fixed for you. And of course, we know that you can't do that. But you do people a great favor if you say, let me tell you what the procedure is for filing a complaint.
Right.
And here's how you can get the attention of the school authorities and you can get a decision. So that's the way, we do business in a systematic way, as opposed to who do you know who's on the school board who could fix it for you. Yeah.
So do you know if, can board members, I'm assuming they can be personally sued, like if someone goes outside of an executive session and is sharing information either on an employee or a student? Have
Well,
there been any?
I think there would have to be a showing of, let's say that you knew somebody was very irate, very hot and bothered about something, and you revealed some information and it led to they're going out and injuring this person that you're talking about. That would be the case where, but it would be really hard to prove that connection, I think. Generally speaking, you're protected by school district insurance just the same way as the board members are, just in the same way that employees of the district are. So, by and large, you're protected. If you were to do some violence in the school buildings, you wouldn't be protected, obviously. Anything was criminal, you wouldn't be protected. But when you make a decision, and then I think, Ron, you're getting into, well, what if a board member goes out and, essentially makes a decision for the whole board, and let's say you went out and signed a contract on behalf of the school district. Well, if the board didn't pass that, that would be an invalid contract. So, there isn't a whole lot of chance for board members to go do things that can't be called back, if you will. So for the most part, even if you were in a 4-3 vote and you were the swing vote or something like that, or you were the major advocate of something, the board as a whole owns that decision, and the board as a whole would be sued. Essentially, the school district is sued if there are decisions made by the board that are argued to have some consequence. Yeah, you can find an attorney to go into court. And thank heavens we do have this unified system of paying for those kinds of claims. I just recently have known of the school district, that small district that ended up paying over $1 million in claims, but fortunately the PACE paid all of it, and it had to do with personnel decisions. A common one nowadays is sexual harassment. And so I even had a board situation one time when the board chair was accused of sexual harassment by the superintendent. And then there was another complaint going the other direction for a different matter. I can't remember the details, and in that case, PACE appointed 2 different attorneys to represent each of them. And so it was wild and crazy, but you've got that kind of coverage, and I think that can help assure you that if you take on the job of being a board member, you don't sacrifice your personal and family financial security.
In our recent history, not in our district, thank goodness, but in other districts, we've heard of districts where the board hasn't, who's made a decision that's against the law.
You mean, for instance, as in masking?
Yeah, or vaccinations or something like that. And a lot of what we hear is rumors.
Well,
so
I can tell you that, the OSEA district, that was a case there. And there was one in Eastern Oregon. And this is a public matter, but the VIII district was going to be fined $64,000 or something, and we negotiated it down to $13,000. So, that's all public knowledge. So they were, it was Oregon Health Authority one, and then OSHA was another, for the workers. And so I think that, yeah,
I know.
those agencies don't want to sap school districts of money they need to present programs to kids, but they do want to have enough consequence that, yeah, it's not toothless kinds of edicts that they're putting out. So that's been the biggest controversy, I think, in terms of the boards getting penalized for doing something, because it was a decision of that board under a particular superintendent's recommendation. So, but there haven't been a whole lot of examples that when it's an ethics commission situation and board members, whether it's all board members brought in or a couple of board members, because they have violated one of the ethical rules, that is a fine that the member has to pay personally. It's not a great, huge fine. It's, like I say, I think it used to be $50, now maybe it's $250. And that would be for violating the open meetings law, largely. Okay, well, I think I'm through with the time I have allotted. Again, thank you for your service. It's, there's provision up in Washington State now, I think, that board members can vote to give themselves salaries. I don't think we have that provision yet in Oregon, but maybe it's coming.
Yes, but it's there.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, another stipend thing. It's not exactly a salary. but-
Do you know of any boards that have voted?
Springfield was hot.
OSBA is saying kind of hold off until we can kind of study this
Yeah.
and see where it's gonna go.
There may be an ethics violation.
Yeah.
Yes. That's right, your ethics violation.
So,
I don't think so.
Well, county commissioners can do
Yeah.
yeah, that one.
Large city boards like Seattle and so forth, there's so much time demanded, particularly the board chair and vice chair, that they may be approving salaries. And
Yeah,
there's a, recognition that we may exclude a lot of people from boards membership because they simply, would have to give up a job or a part of a job, or their business would have to hire some more people. And so that there's a desire to make it financially easy.
My concern is who you attract
Yeah,
on the other side
right,
with the salary for something that's not been salary for so long.
yeah.
it's not gonna be much of a salary, right, okay? No,
So, yeah.
500 or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll let you get on with the rest of your board meeting. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Very fun to
Very good.
come down and talk to boards, and like you say, I've kind of lived it with my late husband and seeing him go through, even community college boards I found had their ups and downs and personnel problems and all that, so it was a lived experience, so. Have a good evening and a good rest of your meeting tonight.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go for lunch, which I will eat on.
I was gonna make sure you have me on.
Do we want to take a 5-minute break before we continue on with the rest of the meeting, or?
Sure.
Soldier on.
Yeah, I think.
Okay,
It's a little one.
let's adjourn let's come back at 6:40.
Hey, Nancy.
Oh, somebody.
Yeah, I wasn't.
Okay.
Oh, that's fine.
All right, looks like everybody's back and we're ready to carry on.
But we know all that.
Okay, and pretty close to our estimate. So first up, we have the consent agenda.
I move for approval.
A second.
All right, any discussion? Yeah. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously.
Good luck to cross country. Yes.
Yes, indeed. And congratulations to Carter and the team.
Yeah.
All right. Did we have anybody sign up outside for public comment? Okay. Moving on to reports and discussion. And my understanding is that our student representatives couldn't be here.
They sent some nice
But
written
they sent-
reports.
Yep,
Yeah.
they sent the reports ahead. And same for OSEA and SLEA. So Division 22, Alana, is that you?
Yes, that's me. And mostly we're just notifying you, and I'm pleased to say that we are in compliance because we have not been in compliance in a few items previously. So we were working through plans with the ODE. We have implemented, and so they signed off on them. So for the 22-23 school year, we're fully compliant, and our report is already posted on the website. So we just needed it in the minutes that we were notifying you, and that we put that there.
Okay. Thank you. And moving right along to superintendent update. That's you again.
Oh, I can look quick. Alrighty. Well, most of you probably saw, I got a newsletter out to you, so I don't like to just restate everything I just sent you in a letter, so try to add either things I left off and remembered later, or just some other things that are coming up now. So we've had lots of school events. A lot of them had the fall festivals. A few of the events that I actually had the opportunity to attend, I thought I'd mention. I know Cottage Grove High School had the CTE careers introduction of local partners, local meaning South Lane, but also, I mean, Cottage Grove, but also in county. I know Taylor and Sherry, we were just finishing our meeting. You had a chance to go see that. London and Jarena did their fall festival together this year. I got a lot of great pictures, but didn't have time to have somebody put them up on a slideshow for me. Great pictures. It was the first one I've gone to where there's been so many parents and community members that were working it and were there for long enough time that I got to visit with them, got to know some of the local people. That was really nice. And it was just great. Really fun for the two schools. They're really trying to partner more because there's only one teacher at each of the levels. Gives a chance for them to actually have like a partner to plan with. And so their plan is to have more things together. They'll do something at the end of the year out at Jarena. And then Kennedy does a lot of work with both schools. So we seem to be kind of drifting in a direction that I would love to see us do, and that would be have kind of a K-12 outdoor project adventure kind of learning magnet school where kids from all over the district could apply to it, and it would be across those three buildings. So something we've started to talk about. There's all kinds of challenges to get over, especially with high school, doing anything different with high schools. And this year, speaking of high schools, Kennedy was selected for an ODE, Office of Civil Rights audit. And so they'll be looking at things to see mostly where we could have some disproportionate numbers. That when they look at alternative schools, they're looking to see really are all kids getting access to rigor, the CTE opportunities, those kinds of things, which Kennedy is, I've never been through this kind of audit. I've had OCR complaints from the state, and as you know, we've had a couple this year. But this kind of audit I haven't been through before. So the way it works is they sent us a worksheet with some documents that we have to send to them. And then they are scheduling a visit here. I think it's coming up in 2 weeks, where they will meet with most of us at the district level. They will meet with all staff at the school level. And they'll just ask more questions about all of those areas that they're looking into. And I don't even know what the final write-up is about. I don't know if they have findings. I don't know if they just give us a general summary. So it's new for us.
Do
yes.
you know if they take into account the makeup of the community also?
Yes, they look at all of that. And actually, it was really easy on some of the questions because some were about the facility and meeting ADA and that kind of stuff. And, you know, we always worry a little bit with our old buildings because we know they're not completely ADA compliant, but they are for the time that they were constructed, which is really what the rule is. And I don't always know if all these agencies have the same rules. So they assured us that the report we had done with the Long Ridge facility plan process, that was all current enough and we could use all that information. So that was good. That was helpful. And they're also going through accreditation this year, as well as Cottage Grove High School. So that's a lot of work on the school's part. My previous school district, they went through when I was there. I didn't participate very much because they mostly are working with school staff and the administrators, but it's a lot of work for the administrators. In fact, we'll have to do some support for Haley at Kennedy. She doesn't have anyone else to share the work with. So more to come on that. Let's see, Bohemia is going to be involved coming up here in a few weeks, involved in the co-teaching training through WestEd. It is the highest quality training you can get for teaching your ELL students. You know that we're looking at making large growth with them because we need to. They need us to have them do that. And the most supported model for doing that is having the English language development instruction taught by the classroom teacher with a coach that has expertise in that. And so that's what we mean by co-teaching. And the whole school's involved in that. It's been a little challenging. In fact, any of you have your sub license, we could use you that week. It's trying to have all teachers in training all day for a whole week is really challenging to get enough subs. And I'll be the principal for some days, and so will Brian, and so will I think Jeremy and Chad. We're all taking our turns there. I think it's 4 days. 2 is that next week or the following week? And then anyway, it's coming up.
Next week and the following week.
Okay.
And then it's Thanksgiving.
Yeah. That's right. I know. Can you believe that?
It is.
There's just been a lot of community events lately. We saw some of you at the trick or treat and got to be a part of the Rotary table. And that was the first time I had been a part of that Main Street event. And so that was fun. Also the Cottage Grove Community Hospital. I'm on that school board. Some of you might, I'm school board. On that board, some of you might not know that. Sherry and I are there together. And we had a leadership update that was with the foundation board. And then I'm also on South Lane Mental Health Board, and we had a meeting last week as well. We also are doing, as I wrote in my letter to you, the update, doing some more work with South Lane Mental Health. We do have their director coming to do some teaching with teachers around trauma-informed care practices. And I participated in that. In fact, I thought I would share with you something I learned, because we're always learning, right? There's always something new coming up. So one of the things I learned that we probably all know is when you're dealing with someone who is dysregulated and clearly they've been triggered by past trauma or something is triggering them. And in this case, we're talking about students who are in the classroom. The best thing to do first is pause and take a breath to make sure that, you know, you're feeling as calm as you can be. Because what you want to do is sort of counter the anxiety that the student is feeling. The next thing is to match, and that's the new part for me. Like sometimes kids who are, you know, and we might say, stop banging your pen, right? But what we learned is the best thing to do is pick up a pencil and start trying to match them and slow the rhythm. Because there's something about, they're not doing that to irritate you. That is a self-soothing thing. For some reason, that movement, that regular rhythm is soothing to them, but is triggering us because it's loud, it's noisy, they're not listening to us. Just that, I mean, that was, if you think about pausing and matching them, if they're moving a lot, try to move with them and slow down. If it looks like they're trying to run, a lot of our kids, we call them, so we say they're eloping. They want to just take off out of the classroom, go with them, but kind of like, let's go for a run. Let's go for a walk around the building instead of chasing them where they're going to get more panicked and leave. Just to say, come on, hey, let's go this way, or whatever you can do to try to match their behavior, but to slow the rhythm and calm them. And then if you can start the big deep breathing to get them to mimic you. And then the third thing I learned, so I'm just remembering this, pause and breathe, match. And the third thing is to feed them. Because the anxiety, they are burning calories like crazy. And if you can get kids to a calmer time, and a lot of our teachers know this, they've stacked up on food bars and everything. And it's helpful if it's crunchy, chewy, or like really salty, or like the sour stuff that kids like. So those ones that are sour and they're chewy and stretchy and whatever, there's something about that that helps soothe them at that time. So some helpful tips for us. So I was kind of, you know, like to try to remember the cues that I can step in classrooms and help. I actually had the opportunity.
Our kids are adults.
What?
I said, our kids are adults, so we have to use them on the ground.
Oh, you never know. You're walking in a building and can help somebody. Because a lot of times the other thing we're learning is that when you are dealing with people who are have that dysregulation on a regular basis, like some of our students do, if you're not careful and don't have a wellness plan and a way to keep yourself calm, then you need to have a partner that can kind of come and step in. And in one of the schools, they call it tap out, like the SEL might come in and say, I'm tapping you out if they can see that you're stressed and you're going to start triggering the kid more, or you're getting triggered. And tap out means you're just supposed to go take care of yourself, however you need to do that. What else was I going to say? And then just doing mindfulness practices. Not everybody's into meditation or, you know, some of the maybe what people would think are deeper practices, but really just the mindfulness of concentrating on your breathing so that you can concentrate on how you respond and how mindfulness is. We have some teachers who are participating in a mindfulness training, and I was just online today with OEA Choice, who gave the school district a very large grant before I came here for staff wellness. Actually just invited us into a bigger grant that's going to be over 4 years that I haven't even had a chance to write up or share with anybody, where teachers will have the opportunity, every teacher will have the opportunity if they want to participate. And what they do is work with each teacher on a wellness plan. They were really excited to, I mean, some of the things that showed we had readiness and that we were serious in wanting to support our teachers in wellness is the morale survey. So they thought that was amazing. They didn't know anybody else who had done one. And we said, well, this will be our third spring, so we will have 3 years of data for you. We knew by the feedback we've gotten that teachers want to be engaged in wellness work. So it'll be a 4-year process where they start with helping teachers with their own wellness plan. And then they help us develop systems within the school district. And some of those we're already working on. We are actually paying OEB a little bit extra to make sure any of our staff members who opt out of insurance and might not have coverage for counseling would have that opportunity at no cost. So we're looking into the opportunities not only for students, but also for staff. I also had a chance to talk to a wonderful local funder who is interested in helping us create a coordinated mental health services position that could help both staff and students with making sure they get into any mental health services that they need. So they felt like our district is really serious about doing that work. And then the peace learning circles, we're going to have another week of training in December, another one in January, so that leaves room for up to about 75 staff members to participate. And then we have some who will go to get the trainer training, and then they'll be the trainers for the building, which is the same model they're going to do for the mindfulness training. So that's really exciting to be able to share with our SELs coming up soon. What else? Oh, and our local community funder, many of you know her, but she's very humble. So I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say her name, but she has provided multiple grants to our school district. We have Cottage Grove High School Community Classroom has received over $2,400 for the past 2 years. We'll receive another $2,400. South Lane School District McKinney-Vento program, that's our homeless program, have received $5,000 the last 2 years. We'll receive $5,000 again. Cottage Grove High School paid tutoring program, $8,000 for the 2 previous years, $8,000 for next year. The Jarena School outdoor classroom, they have contributed $65,000 to that. Well, they are providing it at one time, but it's a community garden and a gardening club and some other things that go with it. I was really glad to get this list because I had no idea these things were going on. Because of the humbleness of this person who people know, and teachers apply and say, please help me with this program, or she meets a teacher who has a great idea and she funds their project. So yeah, it's amazing. Kennedy High School Community Care Classroom over the last 3 years received $13,000. They didn't apply, I don't think, this year. They're not getting anything this year. Lincoln Middle School Community Care Classroom over the previous 2 years was given $20,000. Cottage Grove High School Student Leadership Class over the last 2 years, $15,000. And then the Lincoln Bridge Classroom 3 years ago was provided $1,000. So.
And I believe that she gave a very large sum for athletics at Lincoln, so the kids didn't have to pay anything to participate.
Wow. Yes,
I mean,
that was provided through.
50,000 or something.
So,
Large.
That was provided, wasn't it, through Heather's foundation or?
Yeah.
No, Lori donated that.
It was so that
Yeah.
the foundation could continue to grow and wouldn't have to use their funds.
That's right. That's right.
Very generous.
The same person who's really eager to help us develop the mental health care system. You know, you can do some of these things year after year after year, and then you kind of feel like for some things that you might be starting over. And she and I had a 2.5 hour conversation. It was supposed to be an hour last week. And she just has a huge heart, and she has a passion for getting certain things done in the community. And I told her, just come work with me and tell me what you want to do so we can make it systemic and we can make it sustainable. We can find ways that once people start these programs, that we can find ways to continue them rather than continue to start over. But Brian and I didn't even know some of this was happening because I would hear, you know, like, oh, we did this program over here, and I'm thinking, where'd you get that money? Oh, sorry, you know? So anyway,
So
could we please have a list?
I don't know who this person is. It sounds like some of you may, and being humble, we may never know, and the community may never know, but I think on behalf of the community members that I know, if you could extend a thank you to this person
Sure.
for their financial support. It takes money to educate kids.
Term notes we were gonna be writing.
There's some in the book.
Do you know that, Taylor?
No, that's news to me.
No,
The notes.
The self-learning notes, blank words, notes.
Oh, like thank you notes and thank you cards.
yeah,
Okay, I'm with you now. Okay, let's see.
Sure, Okay,
because we just had 3 sport teams do very, very well. So it'd be nice for all of us to sign for each of those.
Yeah.
So pass them around, Taylor.
okay.
So one, yes, take a postcard.
Maybe
I'll sign it.
a staff member could write a note on, you know, each one, if each one of you, then. we can all
Yeah, if we
sign.
could all write, thank you,
Why
but
it's
it's
so
donor,
hard.
and then once you receive it, you can put their name and get it to the person. I think that.
You started out.
I know I already said this in my newsletter, but I just wanted to call out and guess, again, another humble person in the room. My assistant superintendent over here, who is working diligently on a reoccurring data cycle that happens with us looking at our data every quarter that starts with cabinet, goes to administrators, and then we're gonna have a diverse community team that will have students on it, teachers on it, and so working on that right now that includes looking at multiple kinds of data, including street data, which are things like interviews with students that we've talked about doing before, and those culture walks where we're looking at agency, status, agency, and belonging in the classrooms. So we get a lot of that data, but haven't had that opportunity to look at it in groups, or you can say, so what is this telling us, right? So that we can start to not only tell our story, but add data to it. Where those improvements are, and even more importantly, we're doing a lot of things, and we do them because we look at the data and we say we need to make this improvement, so we're gonna do this thing, but rarely do we help people understand how we decide how we're gonna do what we do, how we do that, and then what results we get. So that is his big piece of work here that he's working on designing, and so far we've had cabinet look twice, I think, at our data, then administrators, and he's getting ready for a community-wide team soon.
Next Friday.
Yeah, and I think you're a board rep on that, yeah. So we try to put boards, we'll divvy out the tasks. We try to pick things that might be an area of interest or expertise of yours, to produce to some of our teams that come up throughout the year.
We'll report back to you, but I'm not trying to pick on you. It's
No, no,
not
no.
Tammy and it's I will, unless Tammy wants to help me. We'll report back to you later on this year, just to kind of show you how it's going and the kind of things that we're looking at.
And then the last thing to share is good news, but I know it's something that SLEA's admittedly a little stressed about, but we're moving forward on that conversion in our software. And so the next 2-3 weeks are going to be really, really busy for them, both finance and HR getting trained on the system. They've been putting data in, if I'm speaking correctly. You want to add?
So, last week, we concluded all of the data entry and upload, and we're doing final touches on setting up users and security and the flow of data. And then next week, we have a week of training on all the modules, 2 days for payroll processing, 2 days for purchasing, or a day and a half for purchasing, and a day and a half for general ledger and reports and things. So we'll all be experts after a week. And we are going to bring in some of our office managers to part of that training so they can be on board from the very beginning. And then we'll be rolling it out to all of our office managers shortly thereafter. And the goal is still to be live with the new software 100% January 1st. So our first payroll in January will be processed with the new system. We are running,
Keep your fingers crossed for it.
Soft, please, prayers if we're good thoughts or whatever, you do. We will be running 2 payroll cycles concurrently, November and December. To check, make sure things are going well, but it's, yeah, it's just a little bit of stress there for all of us. It's our, so the system is how we pay all of our staff, it's how we pay all of our vendors, it's how we do all of our state reporting, it's how we do all our billing. So just a little thing.
Stakes are a bit high.
But we've had a lot of support from the software company, Tyler Tech. And all the training's been online and Zoom, but they've been very supportive around that. We've also had some local help. Almost all the districts in Oregon use this particular software, so we had some, people we can reach out to. And then Nancy Hall, who many of you met last year, she's also well versed in the software and has been helping us with the data upload. So it'll be fun.
Yeah, we'll be fine.
Trust me.
We're also we had finalist interviews today for the HR position that we have open, and we have 2 experienced candidates. We had 5 really good candidates, I think.
We interviewed 5, yes.
We interviewed 5. And we have 2 finalists that are very experienced with HR software. One of them is experienced with multiple different HR software. So that's very nice. Didn't say that right. Software.
Yeah.
Anyway, you know what I mean. So, looking to get that person on board soon, and both of the candidates have done training, have done one-on-one training. So I feel like we're very supported, but of course, Rita and SLEA, who are right at the center and have responsibility for the outcome of it, there's just a little stress there. So any support we can give them would be great.
Thank you.
And that's the end of my
Can
report.
I ask you a question on your report on the OEA 4-year grant for the wellness? It sounded like it was wellness training and awareness training, something along the lines of that. Did that?
It's all mindfulness training. So the idea of creating your own wellness plan,
Right.
developing mindfulness practices, using mindfulness practices in classroom, breathing techniques, calming.
The question I had on that, does that extend to other than teachers, say administrators?
I don't know
lunch-
yet because
lunch
this was
breaks?
the first conversation and they were talking to me to find out. They want to find districts that are really committed and that after 4 years, they go on to another district, they know it's going to continue to go. And so they've been working with 3 other districts for 6 years in a pilot. So we would be the first one that they're now applying everything they learned from the pilot. But they don't have everything worked out yet.
That'd be interesting because I know that it's more the teachers are stressed out.
Oh,
The
absolutely.
administrators,
Yeah.
the lunch people, the bus drivers.
Actually, they are working with one district and working with all the bus drivers. So I do know they will. We just have to see what part they fund and what part we would need to back up.
But there's value in that, so, first person that sees the kid in the morning, the counselors that see him in between classes, the lunch lady that sees him at lunchtime. And the custodian, I heard stories of role model custodians at the high
Of
school,
course, yeah.
like
We
Brian.
see everybody as a teacher. We just have to see if their grant does. And if it doesn't, then we look at where we can get other resources to do that. But that is another area. Actually, this same community person is funding some of our teachers to go to learn the classroom part actually this month. And so
Thank you.
Okay, so the last item on the agenda is the board operating agreement. And we went through most of this at our last work session, and there was really just that one question on the should and the will, and Dr. Curtis sent the explanation out for that. So this is an action item. We need to formally adopt the operating agreement.
and then we have a copy for you to sign. Is it already?
I have it here.
Let's go on with
So do I hear a motion?
I move for approval.
Second.
Okay, discussion,
The explanation seemed pretty clear.
okay,
The concerns I have is the path change from, I'm trying to find it here, wasn't prepared. The path. The explanation that we changed in the policy, we changed it from must to should. And because it was too aggressive, the recommendation from the Oregon School Board Association was to change it from must to should, because it was too aggressive. And then we're gonna turn around and take a policy and change and make it say will. And not only that, but also it wasn't enforceable. So if somebody takes and signs this agreement that says will, and then doesn't, or does go out and speak in public or bring it up at another meeting, then it could cross the lines of being unethical.
But it's a different, the policy says should. It's the
Right.
agreement that says will.
Right, and I read the Oregon School Board Association said that we as a board can adopt something more strict
For
right,
your operating.
for operating.
right,
I just don't understand in the grand scheme of, not to use that word, in the grand scheme of things, how we can sit here and, we all know that sometimes we make decisions that are rushed. Sometimes, you know, you look around at different meetings, you see people pointing at their clocks, or, you know, I've been, I didn't say it this meeting, I said it some meeting. At some meeting, you've seen people point at their wrist, or hey, I've been at work all day, I really would like to get home, and I just think sometimes we might make a rush decision. And I think we should just keep it as should. I want to support the decision of the board. I understand that the decision is made by the majority, and I spelled out in Robert's rules clear. I want to. We should all be able to go out and support the decision, even though we didn't vote for it, but I just know that sometimes there are gonna be individuals, including myself, that won't be able to support something and want to talk about it at the next meeting, or wish to go out in public and talk about it with a neighbor or a friend. And with signing this agreement, I won't be able to ethically do so.
well, again, we went over, in the work session, what supporting the decision means, and, you know, it doesn't require you to state that you voted for it, or that you agree with it. Is simply to support that that's the process and the way it works, and that's the decision the board made, and therefore, you know, and therefore you support it because you're part of the board. You know, none of that has changed. In terms of, the policy language, or the agreement language being stronger than the policy language, I think of it as sort of like, something where the federal government sets a limit, but gives the state the option to set a tighter limit. Like when the drinking age used to be 18 federally, but a number of states would up it. In fact, most states upped it to 21. It's that same sort of, the body of lesser authority still has the authority to go farther, you know, and in this case, it's just basically for reassurance to the staff that once the decision is made, we're not going to go unmake that decision at the next meeting. That's kind of really the crux of it there.
But that's what we do at the board. We can undo
If
a
we got,
decision.
yeah, if there's new information brought up that would counter that.
What about giving the staff that doesn't support the decision the reassurance that it's going to be implemented, don't agree with it, we'll do it, and then we have some trust that some information will be received that might change that, so they're more comfortable going along with it. I don't know, I read this here, and it says, the superintendent stated that the importance of discontinuing any more discussion about the issue, either in meetings or outside of meetings, once the decision has been made. Otherwise, it makes it difficult for the whole system to move forward together on implementation. It creates confusion and chaos if staff or community members think there is a chance that the school board could reverse their decision. And that works both ways. You've got a group of folks in the audience that don't agree with the decision that was made, then they have hope that they can bring forth some more information or have a town hall meeting with some board members and change their minds and come back. The policy says should. But there was a suggestion by one board member that they should both read the same. And I support that, and I think they should both read should.
What I remember is that everybody agreed to will in the agreements, but wanted to change the policy to will as well.
That's not correct.
And so that's what I shared with.
I refused to sign the agreement at the last meeting, the way it was written, with the word will. And today I will also do the same. I can't sign something that says will with, in the background that we were sent out, makes it at least the superintendent will understand that I will not discuss the issue in meetings or outside of the meetings once the decision's been made. I can't do that. That's what I was elected to do. I was elected to listen. I was elected to engage. And I was elected to represent. And so if the folks that come to me don't agree, then I will continue to do that. But I will acknowledge that the decision was made by the board. That is the decision. It's the way we will progress at the time being, but there's always room for conversation. And I get it. I understand when there's fear that, okay, why are we even doing this if it could be reversed next week? I mean, it's such a great idea, then unless there's a huge turnover in the board or turnover with an administration, it's probably going to be the same.
I feel like I was elected to support kids. I'm here for kids. And I don't think this really gets into that so much. You know, this is just a framework. So I think, you know, we move on from this to support our kids, our students.
But it's not.
And that's why I would assume why you ran for the board, wasn't for to listen to the community out there, but to support kids.
I ran because I saw concerns that, I mean, it encompasses it all. There are issues with the kids. But not every decision we make is about the kids. We make decisions
That should be our
staff.
foundation. And so I think we need to agree on this if you can and sign it and move on. And then next year we'll have it again, you know, because we have it every year. It's not for your whole time on the board. But we're spending time talking about this and we're not talking about our kids. So that's just my concern.
But we're not gonna talk about the kids if we agree to something tonight and it's about the kids. We basically signed that we won't talk about it anymore. We'll just talk about the next issue if one arises, so. I can't sign it, I can't, because I know how I am, and I know that I will want to discuss things, and I know that people that I talk to that will want to discuss it. I don't understand why we just can't, if the policy says should, I don't understand why we can't just leave it should. And is there another reason besides the implementation that we? Does should hamper the implementation?
No, it's what the board member does.
Yeah, it's additional reassurance to staff, basically, and it doesn't say that you can't discuss these things, it's that you're not going to undermine the decision made by the board going forward, so that when the board decides on a particular policy or course of action, the staff who are there, you know, are thereby charged with implementing that course of action, know that we're not going to come back at the next meeting and reverse that course of action and make them, I mean, these things take, you know, everything that the district does takes time to implement. Very few things would be fully in place in a month. So you could have a situation, you'll likely have a situation where a process has started, people have started doing work towards a particular thing, and then they just have to stop, and that work was wasted. And this is reassuring them that that's not what we're going to do.
Those are strong words like wasted. So let's use it another way. Let's say we vote on something. We start to implement it. It takes a month or so, and we have some folks that become interested in it because they hear about it, and then they do some research, and find some things and bring it to us. With the background, with the way this is written, it would be understood by the superintendent that by signing will, that there would be no more discussion in meetings or outside of meetings. That's what I'm reading on page 1 of the background of the November 6th letter from the superintendent to us, talking about board member standard of conduct under that policy BBF. It clarifies, it states to me and to the board that it would be the superintendent's understanding that we would no longer discuss the issue. It said
At meetings.
or outside of meetings.
So you said earlier, you had read Robert's Rules of Order and it talked about, once the board, the majority approves something, then we all stand behind it. That's really what this is saying, is that we are agreeing with it.
I don't know that it says we should all stand behind it.
I thought that's what you said, that,
Should, and even Oregon School Board, even
yeah.
you, if you can find it here in Robert's rules, let me know. But even Oregon School Board Association says should. Medford School District says use the word should. I just don't understand. It appears tyrannical to me to, especially when the Oregon School Board, the Oregon School Board Association has recommended to this body in the past to change their policy from must to should, because it's too aggressive. In my opinion, will is too aggressive. And so I understand the process. I don't want to spend all night here doing this, but I can't sign something that says will, because then I put myself in a situation where I'm being unethical by speaking about it at a future meeting or outside of the meeting.
Well, personally, I disagree with your interpretation there. But as far as the motion on the table, it's up for a vote.
Okay, so let me add one more thing real quick. So it's my obligation as the minority, I've been a union leader since 2009. It's my obligation as what I feel is, and I'm not speaking for the board, but as what I feel I am a minority in this matter. I could speak all day long about something, and if I can't convince at least one person or two people to vote the way I feel that I'm gonna vote, then it's just wasted air. So I am trying to find a way to convey the concern. So you're telling me that if you voted for something, that you would refrain from ever bringing it to a meeting or discussing it outside of a meeting with anybody?
No.
I feel like that's what we're doing now, is we're discussing it now.
Right.
Pretty thoroughly, because we discussed it last meeting also.
You received the November 6th correspondence from the superintendent, correct?
I didn't.
It says right there, it says the superintendent stated the importance of discontinuing any more discussion about the issue, either in meetings or outside of meetings, once the decision has been made. Otherwise, there's some punctuation error there. I think there's a period there. Otherwise, unless I'm reading wrong, otherwise it makes it difficult for the whole system to move forward together on an implementation.
So that was the comment that I made in the meeting.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that is the interpretation that this whole board has to have in the agreement. What stands is the agreement. I was just referring back to that to remind you why I was saying it's important that everybody support the decision so we can move forward. But when you're looking at interpretation or what the agreement means, you should be looking at the agreement wording itself. And that's what I think Taylor was saying, is that the agreement wording is saying that we're going to support it. So that doesn't mean you don't talk about it. You can even tell people, I didn't support it. I mean, I wasn't for it, but the decision made and I'm going to support it. Doesn't mean you can't talk about it. Doesn't mean you can't tell your view. But it depends on what you're trying to do with that. If what you're trying to do is create dissension and undermine the district's ability to move forward, that's when it's a problem. But I don't hear anyone saying that that difference between should or will changes that anyway.
So somebody mentioned in the last meeting that will and should were the same or similar. The words, I recall that.
I think they are.
And so what about must and will? If you must do something or you will do something.
Totally different. Must is. There's
Pretty
no
strong.
defensive about that.
That's just like the word shall.
Yeah. Mhm.
Is shall and should the same?
Shall, no.
So I look at it like a
Shall, will, and must.
I look at it, let me just lay this out here and then we're gonna vote and we're gonna do this. And so I got two questions. Well, one comment and a question. So if you're driving down the road and you see a speed limit sign, it's white, it says 65. If you go 66, you can get a ticket. Probably won't, you can though. When you take the exit, the off ramp, or go around a sharp curve, there's a speed limit sign. It's a speed sign, not a limit, a speed sign. It's yellow. That's an advisory sign. You should go 35 around that curve, not 55.
I just learned this summer, and I have always believed what you believe, and that's incorrect.
Well, the police officer will always do that. I don't want to give the law. Let me just say,
According to the driver's ed.
the police officer can't write you a ticket if it's raining or foggy or you're tailgating or you're like riding the line. Yeah, absolutely, but it is an advisory speed. But I'm not here to discuss the Oregon law. So the question I have is, what happens if I don't sign it? I mean, my intent is not to undermine the decisions. I want to support the decision, but I also want to be able to speak about it or bring it up to the next meeting. So the question is, what happens if I don't sign it?
Well, I mean, there's not much of a consequence available at all,
We have never
against
ran
board
against it.
members. Yeah, I can't say it's ever happened.
No.
You know, if we
There's
vote,
quite a bit of discussion on
if
it.
we vote on this and it's not a unanimous vote, but it's a majority vote, it still passes.
Yeah.
However, I think it would be very unfortunate because this really should be a unanimous document because we've all talked about it, discussed it, used it, and it's always been unanimous, or at least for my 10 years on the board. So yeah, I think that would be very unfortunate, and I definitely I personally don't really agree with the reasoning that you're using. I don't think those are quite the critical lines upon which the decision hinges. In terms of the distinction between policy and the operating agreement, I would say that the reason the policy needs to be should is because the policy is enforceable essentially through the court system and state law, whereas our own operating agreements are enforced by the much weaker standard of, you know, board censure is pretty much the only thing, unless the voters would go for a recall. And that seems like,
Well, okay, so
in this case, you know, essentially impossible, but I'm just saying that that the terminology can be stronger because the consequences and mechanisms of enforcement are really just us and how we agree to deal with one another. There's no legal implication whatever in changing should to will. Whereas at the policy level, that's governed by OAR. And in terms of being a legally enforceable document, you know, we couldn't say that in policy because it wouldn't be possible for there to be a legal consequence to a board member for not, you know.
right, and I already knew that. I already knew the answer to the question. And so the words that you use, like stronger information provided to us by the Oregon School Board Association. It says there's no way to require a board member to refrain from expressing their opinion after a decision is made. We were reminded that our board had made a change from must to should in a policy rewrite process because we were told that the word must was too aggressive when there wasn't a way to legally enforce it. Now, this is the part that concerns me. However, in the operating agreements, which is what we're talking about now, the board can decide as a body to take a stronger stance. So for somebody to say that
Will instead of should is a stronger stance.
stronger stance, okay. Yeah, so it's not the same, it's stronger. So here's what we're gonna have to do. We're gonna have to vote. I feel that it's gonna pass. I'm not gonna sign it, and I'll have to just prove through my actions for the next 4 years, if the voters let me stay here for 4 years, that I want to support the decisions, and that I believe that the majority of decisions, even if I don't vote for them, I will. But I will not refrain from bringing them up sometimes at future meetings or talking about them in public. So that's
Well,
what I'll say.
We sign this every year, so maybe after you've done it for a year, you'll realize.
Maybe,
that, you know.
Maybe.
I know one thing that's helpful for me is to remember there are processes that happen. You say, what if we get new information and.
Right.
I think that would be something that Yvonne would take into consideration.
Think. I'm sure she would. She seems open-minded, but you think that we don't know for sure. And so if we don't know for sure, then we could always. I didn't know. I'm just saying there, we could get a new superintendent. Dwayne, here we go again. We could, or we could get a new chair. We're not gonna hear this. We're not gonna hear this. And so you're right.
No,
I think,
please listen to me.
Okay.
She's the one in charge of
This year.
making sure implementing it, right? If she gets new information, she could ask the board, please, let's revisit this.
And she has done that in the
And
past.
she has done that. If the policy that we gave her isn't working, or she's asked us to adjust it or change it.
And things change, you know, at the state level, and case law comes down, there are reasons why decisions get revisited, and we have done that. We
But
just,
there already exists a structure to deal with that. It doesn't have to be in our board agreements. And you're just like a closed face right there. You're not even listening to me.
no, I understand. I made my decision.
That's what.
But I do understand.
You're not even listening. You made my decision already. You're not even listening to what I'm saying, that there already exists.
I hear you. But what
a
if?
structure.
What if?
Well, what if they're the bomb that lands on us? You can get all kinds of extreme things going on.
I'm not making that decision. If we make, anyway, like I said, I've made my decisions. I did not, I heard you. Yeah, for 1 year, I made my decision, and then I did hear you, and it did not change my decision.
It seems to me that you arrived here tonight with your decision already made. Which I don't believe that that's a really great position for people on a board to have.
They have told me that I'm stubborn, but they have known me to change my mind.
Yes.
Correct? I mean, I have been like doing that, but I have been known to
Yes.
change my mind when I have seen and heard. Yeah, and that's how you have to.
You've been persuaded.
Yes, yes, yes.
And if I could
That's why I-
remind everyone, it's not just about that agreement, it's all,
Yes.
everything on there. This operating agreements also tell staff what they can expect of board members. And it gives them more confidence. We ask at every level of the organization for people to make agreements. How many times do we rediscuss our administrative agreements? We never don't hold them, but we hold each other to them, and we ask questions like, well, what does that really mean to you? They're a set of operating agreements. They help us operate as a collaborative body, because without individually, there's no power. Same thing with our administrative team. When we ask them, they make decisions based on their agreements and their collaborative work, because individually, we're not giving them the chance to choose, but we want them to come together as a team. We're asking that the board makes that same kind of commitment to working together to come to agreements when they're gonna make a decision that we now have to turn around and make everybody implement. So it's not just that one, it's all of them. So you asked what happens if you don't sign? Well, I'll let you fill in the blank, the perception it gives to staff on every one of those agreements if you're not signing. And that's still your choice.
Well, they
I
need
just-
to, they need to know that I agree with 1, 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's number 3 that I have a problem with the one word, so. That'll have to be the way it is. They'll have to learn. They'll have to watch and they'll have to see how I operate. Or anybody else that refuses to sign, and they will be content with it. My intent is not to come here and disagree with things just to disagree or to bring the wooden spoon in and stir the pot. I'm here to tell the truth, and the truth is that I cannot comply with that background statement that if I sign this is what the superintendent believes it means. I'm sorry. I can't. Anybody that knows
Call
me
the
knows.
question.
Okay. So, is there anyone else, who would like to comment before we have a vote? Okay, therefore, time to vote. We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, the motion carries 6-1.
Thanks for the discussion. Look forward to working with you.
Here is the agreement, for those of us to sign. Moving on to upcoming dates. November 9th to 11th, OSBA annual convention in Portland. I think 4 of us are going this year. The more the merrier. This is a great way to learn more about what we do, and they usually have a couple of pretty interesting speakers as part of the meeting, and lots of opportunity to meet with other board members and administrators, and just learn more about what we do and expand our knowledge. Next regular meeting December 4th. And then January 8th, work session on January 22nd. And so then,
Next Christmas.
yeah, it's Christmas for them. Yeah, I can't believe that we're this far in already.
I know.
And
2% of the school year, which just sounds amazing to me.
all right, and so with that, board member reports, let's start with Tammy this time.
My usual, speaking of the holidays, my usual holiday reminder for and plea for on behalf of kids with disabilities. This is a happy time of year, but for some kids, it's a very strenuous, straining time of year. For some families, this is a time of year that they just get through. So if you look out in your classrooms and you see kids who are dysregulating, it's because there's a lot of expectations on them right now that they don't usually have, and they might not be handling it well. Please have some compassion.
Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you, Tammy. Let's go to Tina next.
What were we talking about? I'm sorry, I was signing the thing.
Just, you know,
Let's
end of the meeting reports,
Oh.
things you might have done, shout outs you want to give, any of that kind of stuff.
The volleyball team was doing very well, the girls volleyball team. I've gone to a couple, I know one of the mothers,
Nice.
really, our daughter plays very well.
Great.
But, just shout out to them, they're doing a really good job.
Yeah.
Thank-
Sorry.
Me,
Hmm?
thank you, teachers, for doing the thankless job of what you do, and the support staff. That's sincere. Gotta give it up. I mean, to all the people that run this school, I've learned a lot about schools, a lot about what makes it all run. And, you know, you can go and you mentioned bus drivers. I was gonna mention bus drivers, but my wife's a bus driver, and to see the amount of miles and the tonnage that they put and the kids, she told me some numbers of how many kids are hauled and some of the locations they go, I just figured the buses drive around town, and they're going up into Molitor Hill and out up past Arena and all these roads into dark with this daylight savings times and such, and in the morning, at night, so, and the support staff couldn't do it without support staff. I mentioned earlier, a custodian that's now a maintenance guy named Brian, a role model at schools. I want the staff to know that I support them. You're watching tonight. And we're gonna make this happen. I did want to bring up, I did get some clarification. The only thing that's come to me from the public is the dog park over on River Road, South River Road. The dog park, the city of Cottage Grove put a sign out that advised the users to park at the high school.
Yep.
So one of the users parked at the high school and was
Don't want to.
that's not the words they used. but
Yes,
they
I
were
know.
So,
accosted by a security guard who didn't, and I was told that so basically it's during school hours, the public cannot use that, so 7 to 5.
Yeah, that's not what was
Would you
reported.
share?
well, we can't help
Yeah.
the city on that.
They can park there after school hours, so we're under obligation to keep kids safe and we can't have people.
Oh, yeah.
I just needed to
That's
give the
not what-
person an answer.
That-
They sent me a picture of, I sent you the picture,
Yeah.
they sent me the picture of the posting
Yeah.
advising people to go park across the street.
So
And
when
Does it
there's
have
an
hours?
individual incident, this is a great idea of something to bring to me, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so we are checking with the high school principal to see if we can find out what actually happened in the meantime. I wanted Brian to just tell you what is the agreement with the city, so that you know how you can respond.
Yeah, and I had already answered.
Yeah.
that.
Did somebody get a hold of whoever put up that sign at the dog park?
I just wanted,
Because
I just
it
wanted to
said
say,
they can park there.
I just
it
wanted to
doesn't
say
say
it so that
only
it's public, so the
during
public knows
non-school hours.
whoever's watching, and we can take the official word that, yeah, you can park at the high school, just on
Not during,
Saturday, Sunday. and-
yeah, not during school.
Outside of school hours.
So if there's a game on Saturday, can they still park there? It's public parking space?
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
but that's not what the sign says. They need to change that.
So maybe the city
That's
needs to
not our-
add a little
yeah.
something to
That's
their
not-
sign.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not our fault.
Because that's what was being reported on Facebook to everybody.
And to be kind to the
They're
public.
all,
too.
no, you park there, right, because that parking lot's horrible.
But
That's what
I
I'm
think
saying.
the public would understand,
Oh,
why during school hours, it's
Oh, yeah.
just that the sign is very misleading.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think it's a great addition to the city. I'm gonna use it a lot, so I just wanna make sure I park at the right time, so. Thank you for clarifying that. They got back to me quick and I got that back to the person, and then they sent me the sign and I just figured I'd ask. Thank you.
Because
Oh,
I think there's only like, what, 4 to 6 parking spots, isn't it?
Yeah, not
Not
Regular to.
handicap, yeah.
Yeah, so there's not a lot of.
No,
parking
no.
lots.
Small parking lot.
Well, I'll add, I do think it's a good idea for the school and the city to work together. It's
Yeah.
public space and public tax dollars, so.
And-
Be a
and
need
we-
and fulfill it.
Yeah, we do a lot of partnerships together.
For sure.
That's all I have.
Okay, Joe.
Oh, I'm not sure.
I was kind of bouncing back and.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to do. So it goes.
Absolutely. So I had an opportunity last Saturday to go to the state cross-country meet and watch the girls and the boys.
Is that just amazing?
Oh, it was amazing. The weather was really amazing. Hats off to those kids. I mean, they were grounded. The weather was, at least it wasn't too cold, but it was really fun to watch. Carter's just out there all by himself. I mean,
He's such a great kid.
we haven't seen some, well, I remember Bruce Davidson back in
Yeah.
84, 85. He
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
he's a pretty good runner, but you know, to see Carter at the level that he's performing at is very amazing. And he is only a junior, so.
So when they do that at LCC, it's all classes from 1A to 6A, right?
Yes.
So it's not
yeah.
just 4A, so it's a really big deal.
Well, I mean, so the 4A, 1A, 2A, 3A all run together, and
Okay.
then the 4A does run, and then 5A, and then 6A, and then I did ask my son, I said, well, how would Carter line up against the 5A and 6A, because Cottage Grove, you know, go back 30 years ago, you know.
As Jeffrey just reminded me, we used to.
Oh, yeah.
Marshfield and Sure,
And-
they don't do it the same way now.
Right, yeah, and so, the times that he ran, he's right there with the 5A, 6A level. He was within seconds. of
Yeah,
State title, even at the 5A, 6A level, so.
And maybe if there'd been somebody close to him, he made up
Exactly,
those few
yeah.
seconds.
Right.
and
Exactly.
5 hours later, then he's playing soccer.
He's playing, and then they played really well, and now they're in the semifinal game for tomorrow night, and the soccer team could have an opportunity to win a state title.
Wouldn't that be something?
That would be
Fantastic.
amazing. Yeah. So I think it's tomorrow night, 6:00.
Is it on?
It's a
Home,
Yeah,
yes.
we were lucky in our bracket and after everything kind of shook out, home field advantage until the final. So hopefully we'll be able to win tomorrow and then move on Saturday.
Wow. It just does your heart so good to see those kids, because they practice every night, right? After the pool. I mean, they work so hard.
And I don't wanna take the time, Joe, but I wanted to throw a shout out to the new, and it's a brand new coaching staff. for the
Right.
Soccer team, and it's amazing that they've come together the way that they have, and I'm just really grateful for all their hard work. The coaches and the kids, they've done a really amazing job this year. It's so much fun. I will stop now because I will take up too much time. People need-
What do you have a child that's running?
I have a child at Grand Cross Country and he's on the side. So,
Right, hopefully I'll see you soon. Sherry?
Let's see. With the Little Lions, which was really, really great. That's the Early Childhood Development Center from 6 weeks to 3 years, right? And that was really neat. Shane Dye, who is now at the pool, he came to our foundation meeting because Jeff wanted to introduce him to the board. I am so impressed by him. What do you, Brian, everything he had to say? I think he's gonna turn that program around. And Jeff said that pool is in the best shape it's ever been in.
He brought pictures to show it.
Yeah, I think he's pretty proud of it, but I really think that Shane's gonna do a great job with those kids and
Yeah.
build that program up. So that's good. OSAA, we need wrestling, girls and boys basketball officials. Anybody have any of those skills?
Why'd you not say that?
Because we really.
I've been approached on the basketball side.
Because, in the past, they've had to postpone games.
I know.
So, come on now.
I know.
You know someone, you can't do that. You can't get paid for it. but you can
No,
do it. Okay, that's great. Thank you for helping us. And then we went to the community health center, the groundbreaking.
Oh, yeah.
That is gonna be so good for the community, but so good for our kids in the CTE programs. And I think it's next year is when it's gonna open up and we'll have a really bigger dental program, and it's exciting for this community, I think, to do that. Just a time to say, when are we gonna get an enrollment report? Is that next meeting?
We received it.
No, I want someone to stand up and talk about it. That's what I asked last. You can't read that. That's what I asked for last time. Not that you have, not that you have to do it. But then Brian says, well, what am I supposed to talk about? So, so I was surprised it wasn't on the agenda for today.
Well, because of the training with Nancy, we were just trying to put what we had to have
Okay,
here,
okay.
but we can do it again. Brian can explain
Yeah.
the sheet. And what the
That would be
changes are.
great. And then, we don't have the administrators here like we did in the past years. Could we somehow get a monthly report on what's going on in the different schools? Do they?
When you say what's going on in the different schools, do you mean sports or
No,
activities?
yeah,
Or
yeah. Kind of like what our student report said,
It's like something to celebrate.
Yeah.
Because I remember
Yeah,
when my kids were little, they did, like a monthly student, like student of the month, and you would go and they would talk about the kids in your class. And they would have a couple of kids that were being recognized for their great behavior or something that they did in the classroom that was really wonderful. And if we could hear the good news about the schools, that would be really helpful, because I know people probably get tired of hearing me talk about high school, but that's where my connection is with my child. And I don't have that connection with Lincoln or with the elementary school anymore. And I think that would help us all feel more connected with what's going on in all the buildings.
We were hoping we could bring that to you all through the What's Great in South Lane and just keep rotating that around. We're trying not to add more to the principal's plates. When they have to write another report, and we'll need to give them a template, so that's why, I mean, because then they don't know, well, what do you want to know? They're so in it every day, you know, is it like fall festival and what we were doing there, or do you want to know instructionally what we're focusing on?
It could be any of, like, what maybe it's what the administrators are dealing with at the moment or are most proud of. It could be the fall festival and how people are coming together for that, or it could be an instructional win, and it could just be like one kid that did something really great. I mean, those stories, like a testimonial about what's going on, always feel like they hit home.
I have to tell you, principals are rarely going to share a story of one kid, because
Right.
they're always worried
Yes.
of all the kids they didn't identify. But a prompt like, what are you most proud of this month about your school? That's a prompt they could write a comment.
We wanna know the other side too, though.
Pardon me?
We wanna know the other side too, what problems they might be having.
Like, what do you need? What do you need?
I doubt they're gonna put that in.
So,
But I think, like, you know, when they had all the CTE stuff in the back parking lot for the high school kids, that was really neat. But only Taylor and I knew about it, and that was kind of an offy thing because Brian just happened to come in. Or none of us would have known about it, and that was really neat to go
That's
see.
because sometimes they don't even tell us.
Yeah, I know, I went.
They
yeah.
decide to do it and it
Yeah.
doesn't get on the calendar because they're focused on students and getting the students there.
I just feel like as school board members, we want to be involved and know what's going on. And I really appreciate it when we know, you know, the carnival or an open house is coming up for us to attend, if we, you know, can do that. That's wonderful to know those things.
Well, it's been on there regularly.
So we made an effort to make sure that it is something you're seeing those dates. So
If
if
I know
you're
about
seeing if we know about it, we'll make sure it's on there. So you do know when those events are.
Yeah, the Kennedy thing that they had wasn't on their page at all, anywhere.
So he's thankful that they shared it.
But
Yeah.
I couldn't remember the timing and stuff, so it was like,
Oh, it came back.
Believe me, we
That's
keep
on the.
it was like,
telling them,
Yeah.
tell us, and sometimes, I mean, sometimes I'll be in the school and they'll go, oh, can you come back this afternoon? We're doing such and such, you know, like Kevin just told me, we're gonna send some kids over to interview, but I don't know when it's gonna happen yet. I'm like, okay, let me know. And it might be someday I'm visiting, and he say, oh, can you know, can the kids interview on this thing? So some of it's not always planned out totally in advance, and I'm happy to have them do something. But the other thing you have to remember is it also becomes competitive between them, and we're really trying to make sure that we create collaboration. So that's why what we had them presenting on before is work that we're all doing. It's just now they're going deeper with their PLC work, and they're really looking at individual students' work, and they're really focusing on the data and what they're doing for interventions and those kinds of things. So I don't know, do you have any ideas of what that could look like? That
The one thing about the What's Right in South Lane is, like Sherry, you mentioned, the event that you went to, that will be in there.
Yeah.
this coming month. And so if you didn't go,
Well, that's a really.
then that'll be in there.
That's
And
really
the
good.
fall festival will be in there. And what we're trying to do with that is give not only you, but the community more information about the good things that are happening without the burden on the principals. Like, I'm already putting a little bit of burden on the principals because I at least have to interview them or talk to them to get this information.
Yeah,
And so asking them to do a report every month. I've been a principal, like Sherry, you know that, like years ago, I was a principal and having to do that, and it's not the most important work that we do. The most important work is actually doing the work that we then be reporting about. And so I just would hate for it to be so burdensome on them, or even like too much of a burden to where they're not able to then do the things that we're wanting them to then write about.
Could it be someone other than the principal? That gives the, that
you
just
put-
sends the information?
So right now,
Yeah.
as I've been going around the school, everyone is telling me how exhausted they are. From the administrator to the teachers to the EAs. And so I'm just trying, I mean, remember that morale survey went to everyone, and I'm trying to lessen the impact. They love to come do a presentation and really share something like that that
And
they're
that's
doing.
wonderful.
Like Bohemia could come share what they're learning about, you know, the co-teaching. They're all doing, you know, different things. Some are doing restorative justice, some are doing mindfulness, others are doing I mean, we could have them come and report some of those, but we've told them this year, your job is implementing PLCs because we need to get changes on student outcomes. And that's what we've really focused on, which is why data is important, the PLCs. Is it something you can report on? Not until you get like a summative report at the end of the year. Those are the things that are hard. I mean, every Wednesday, they're meeting the teams. Every Wednesday, they're looking at student work. Every Wednesday, they're having professional development. But it's not the kind of stuff you can report on because it's about tips, about instructional strategies and those kinds of things. So I don't mind asking them to do something, but I want it to be meaningful for them. So a celebration, that is what Brian's doing with the what's right.
And that's great too.
I guess on the old adage about no news is good news, that's a good thing, but we are obviously all different kind of people, we like information, so.
Right.
And a lot
It'd be helpful, I get it.
of school boards
The other thing is there's,
celebrate the death of kids.
right,
We don't have kids coming, you know, just whether for a country
Well-
team or somebody that won a spelling contest or something.
we could then invite them if you want to recognize them in some
Yeah.
way, that's not something that has been brought up before.
But,
We haven't had a state champion cross country since
No.
Nairo Burleson,
Yeah.
so I would love to see.
And he's pretty old.
Well,
That was a long time ago.
that was a few years ago.
Do you want to just recognize him or
I think the whole
have you wanted?
And
to-
the girls actually placed higher at state than the boys did.
I think just this real simple thing of having them come in, we can ask a couple questions and stand up and applaud.
But we might have a boys soccer team that will have one state.
I mean, we could reach out to Garrett and see how he would like to facilitate that possibly.
Yes.
I mean,
yeah,
it
maybe
come
just
in for-
ask Garrett, we'd like to recognize them in some way, what do you recommend? Cause it might be that the whole team doesn't wanna come in here
Yeah.
on Monday, yeah.
And
This is us.
That's the other thing I was gonna say. Usually the answer is, well, why don't you come out and recognize
Right,
that?
or again.
I mean, we teams are league champions, so that is pretty amazing for us. Never has happened before, like Joe saying.
Well, and the girls, like, you know, I go into all those volleyball games. Marist won the state title and Marshfield was right there. And so Cottage Grove, when you have, you know, some of the best teams in the state in Nord League, it's very difficult.
Of course, the registered guard doesn't know the Cottage Grove exists.
Right.
Until something goes wrong.
The things that registered guard doesn't know, that's a long list.
Right. Okay, Colleen, you said.
Don't get her going.
One more thing that's not work related, the leadership program at the high school went to Seaside yesterday and today and had a conference. And so hopefully the kids are gonna bring back some really great ideas to make the experience at school even more exciting and dynamic and include more kids in the events that they're doing there. So, yay.
So let us go back to the administrators and we'll see if there's something that kind of meets that spirit of celebrating.
Right.
and highlighting and
I think that's what we're asking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to support and be,
Yeah.
we do all the policy work and we hear all the, you know, the stuff that we're kind of sludging through to make the great things happen. We want to hear about the great stuff too. It's kind of like.
I guess that you want to hear it, I'm just saying, coming to a board meeting isn't like,
It's not exciting.
Anybody.
it's not reciprocated by those.
Exactly.
Well, I'll
Right.
tell you, until the last few years, those administrators sat back there every darn board meeting for a million years.
And they love
Well, until the last.
I think it's exciting. So,
So, and it sounds like, board members are wanting to attend things. It sounds like there's a soccer game
Yeah.
that tomorrow that you guys could attend. And then I'm also getting ready to send you, the SLEA update. She had emailed it to me. I'll also send that to you, and that does talk about, the staff, certified staff, at least, and their feelings. So
I didn't get that.
That'll-
You just
I'm
sent me
just now
that.
getting-
Because earlier in the meeting, you said it was sent out. I've been scouring.
You do keep us very informed.
You
Tanya.
can send it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya, for what you do for us.
The first play at the high school is starting this Friday too.
Coming up.
There's another opportunity.
minutes left or something like that.
8 minutes left.
Okay, is it me now?
Yes.
Okay.
You already answered.
No. First of all, I'll say, what used to happen, and I think maybe this went away with the previous superintendent, is that, building admin wrote up like a monthly sort of what's going on in our school.
Yeah,
That
I
I
heard
hope
about
was
it.
not directly for the board,
It
that
was.
it was just for us.
Solely.
And they hate it.
So.
Okay, so, I thought that went other places besides just us, so, you're aware of that, and I won't say any more about it.
It was one of the things they asked when I got here to please not make them do.
Okay, fair enough. Also, doesn't each building have an electronic calendar?
Newspaper?
They have a website,
They're not
you
always
can
up to-
subscribe to them, but they don't always. put it on.
I'm sure they're not.
Also on your, email.
I just wondered if those calendars were linked so that.
No. No, we have tried over and over again to figure that out, not just in this district, in other districts. When you do your website, there isn't a way to make school calendars align with the one you have in the district. You have to have the district, and then each school has their own.
But I have linked that into your Who Knew, where you can go to the link that goes right to the calendar and you can hit each school
Okay,
easily.
so if that ever becomes technologically more feasible, maybe that would be a handy way to keep everybody in the same loop. Enough of that, chess season is going to start the Wednesday after Thanksgiving and run through February, and it looks like maybe we're gonna have 1 or 2 teams in the league that we haven't had for a couple years.
Great.
So that's exciting. Hopefully, I'm gonna get at least one more high school player, once he's done winning everything else. And,
Yeah, because basketball's.
yeah, I know.
Well, Carter can do too.
May have to go talk to the basketball coach and see if he could spare a player for 1 day a week, you know, because they practice a lot more days than chess does. I did go to the community health center, wall breaking instead of groundbreaking. And
Yeah.
that was interesting. It's gonna be, that's a big deal, and I did not realize, I don't know, I've been hearing about it for a long time, but apparently 17 years is how long people have been working on that, which is just about exactly how long I've lived in this community. So it'll be great to see that going forward. Did go to the CTE thing at the high school,
That was neat.
first ever, and that was neat, and a bunch of the kids were into it and doing things like, somebody had a bucket truck, so they were lifting them up in the bucket, and the sheriff's office was there, letting kids fingerprint themselves, and somebody had a simulator for an earth mover, so you can get in and, you know, drive a virtual backhoe and all sorts of great things like that. And Kevin Harrington said he has ideas for improvements for next year, so.
And I know they're putting together a video about that day, so when that's ready, we'll
That'd be
definitely
good,
make sure to show you that.
Yeah, so for a first time through, that was great. I missed the downtown trick or treat because my kid decided that her fortunes would be better in the community. Basically, shorter lines, bigger payoff, perhaps.
No, we gave out a lot of candy.
Yeah,
Uh,
there were no lines.
My kids always made out well there before, but we went over kind of in the Viking neighborhood and they also did great there. But I did go to the Halloween parade they had through the school earlier. that
Oh,
day.
the serpentine.
Yeah, the serpentine through Harrison School. That was lots of fun, seeing all the kids in their costumes.
It was a good year, the weather was right.
Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, setting out to 50 degrees, setting up downtown. We were worried about the wind.
I have definitely been wet on Halloween
Yeah.
before. It was nice to not ice you.
Good year.
And I think that's all I have. So. All right, and with that, thank you very much, everyone, and meeting adjourned.
Thank you.